This is a review of the Kronos Sparta turntable. It's the newest offering from Kronos. It comes in below the flagship model at just a little over 1/3 the price. It gives you almost 90% of performance. How cool is that? Join me and Louis Desjardins from Kronos and Bill Parrish from GTT as we set the turntable up. It's a fascinating design. There's so much technology packed into this turntable. Wait till you see. Here we go. I'm here with Louis Desjardins and we're setting up the Sparta turntable. You'll notice that the table, the top plinth, sits on suspension. And Louis, explain the suspension, please.
Well, the suspension is basically, you want me to remove one to show it? Or?
Yeah, show the camera.
The suspension is basically a cap, a leg cap that has O-rings, and it's basically free to hang from above.
Look at that.
So we have freedom in motion on both the horizontal and the vertical plane. And we have an adjustment screw underneath on the leg itself so that we can do the leveling afterwards. So installation is extremely simple. And when we screw the suspension in, we just basically
pulling this up.
We're pulling
Yeah,
the
pulling
entire
it up.
assembly up.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
right.
Now we installed the lower platter, and the lower platter has a belt around it. And is that attached to a motor or is that a counter plate?
That's right, it's a motor. We have one motor on the left side for the top platter and a
the
motor on
motor's
the
right
right
here,
side
yeah.
for the bottom platter. Why we have a motor on each side is so that the pull on the belt is equal on both sides and the table doesn't get pulled towards the motors. So there's no oscillation that is born from that, where you would have, like, let's say, an effect on speed stability. So this is completely, it's a way of stabilizing the entire suspension.
So that the lower platter is really not, in a way, attached to the upper platter at all. Because
No.
it's really, you're using the lower platter as a counter force for the suspension.
That's right.
I
It's
get
to
it.
stop
Okay.
the torque force.
Got it.
And there's nothing that this lower platter is free to rotate by itself.
Got it. Okay.
So that
I understand.
vibrations from this platter are not translated or not transmitted to the upper platter. So they're two different, completely independent systems, except that they're connected through the outside here, these pillars that keep the distance between the platters the same, and of course the orientation of both platters, that they're coordinated, aligned together, so that the effect is. And these are made out of Delrin so that it cuts the transmission of vibration.
So you're effectively putting the suspended turntables, the forces that are at work in a suspended turntable, you're canceling them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Kronos is really about, the design of Kronos was really about striking a balance. It's a balancing act. And in the end, every kinetic device is a device that has to have good balance. So what we're trying to do is have a balance where the energy state of the table is as low as possible while it's in motion. In other words, we're not loading up the suspension, we're not building forces that we can't release. We're keeping the energy state stored in the table as low as possible.
Well, when you hold a gyroscope in your hand, you spin it,
Yes.
you understand what these forces are. When something is at
That's
motion
right.
in space, it's sitting on something, you feel that. And when you turn a gyroscope and it's spinning, your hand gets all twisty and turny. I understand that, and what you're setting out to accomplish here in the cancellation of those forces.
Well, the platter turning, there's a little bit, it's a little bit different than, let's say, in an helicopter, because an helicopter is a direct drive. So what happens in an helicopter is as the rotor rotates, the helicopter wants to rotate the other way because it's pushing against the rotors. But in a turntable with a motor that's not suspended, such as this one, what happens is that there's a drag effect. It's inevitable. And then there's a bit of a tendency for the plinth to want to follow the platter, and when the suspension stops it from actually being able to rotate, then it gets in a precarious balance and it starts shaking. So the lower platter is to stop all torque-induced vibrations by making the torque force nilled out. The two platters rotate at exactly the same speed.
Well, experienced users of turntables know that there's a rule of thumb in sound of a suspended turntable. Suspended turntables have a more softer presentation. They have a more friendly presentation than an overmass design turntable such as the Walker, which is pure mass. And the issue with this is that it's almost dulling the transient in some of the suspended turntables.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this achieves actually the kind of transients that you have with a rigid table, but with a more balanced harmonic presentation, because you have isolation from the vibration coming back from the speakers or the mechanical vibration.
Let's take a look at the bearing.
Well, this bearing that we use is made out of aluminum bronze, and it has a groove on the outside that's basically the oil pump. As the platter rotates, the oil is driven up on this groove, and there's oil jets that feed the ball and the
Hold it
shaft.
up. I'd like everyone to see that. If we could spin it just a little bit here, you can see in there. See the little groove and how it, there it is, right down here, right in here. Okay. Then you put a little ball, you put a ball there.
Yeah,
at
the
top.
ball's already at
The ball's in
bottom
place.
right now.
So this is, an inverted bearing is like a Frisbee on your finger.
That's right, exactly. It's hanging. The friction point is at the top, and that gives stability, because instead of the platter being leveraged against the bearing, the platter has its stability at the top. Okay, what we have here is we have the controller. This is a prototype, so it'll be a little bit different on the final unit, but we have the speed selector 3345, and then the speed is adjustable in increments. So the up toggle is plus 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 or minus minus minus. So you can adjust the speed with a strobe, and then you have a memory setting. In the memory, there's a memory bank for the 33, and there's a memory bank for the 45. So when you switch, you go back to the final adjustment that was made, and basically once you've adjusted it once, there's not a lot of need to ever adjust this again, though you could, check in case of a belt stretching or something like that.
Okay.
So we have part of the controller. We have an RCA jack here that's used to power the strobe, because the turntable comes with a strobe. So all you need to do is plug this in and start the turntable. And we're perfectly adjusted
I like that.
already.
I love that. So this plugs right into the control unit.
That's right.
Your light for your strobe.
That's right.
That's fantastic.
And it flickers at 60 hertz. You can see it flicker. So the frequency generator is built into the power supply. And all this is basically an RCA jack with a LED at the end. And that comes with the table.
So that's it. Do that. Set your speed. Tap your finger down here on the side of the controller to adjust it. And you're good to go.
And then you memorize it, and it stays in memory.
No, that's totally cool. Very impressive. And that completes the setup process. Let's next take a look at the system, and let's spin up some vinyl.